Hey everybody, Daniel from Spacedock here. Now, the sequel trilogy of Star Wars films is coming to an end soon, and I can't help but notice that there has been very little political or strategic context as to what the hell is going on in these films, and I'm wondering if that's going to remain the case all the way to the end. Now, there are many diverging opinions about these movies. Whether or not you think they are entertaining character stories is largely irrelevant to the point I'm making here, because whether these are good personal stories or bad personal stories, what they lack is grander context for what's going on in the galaxy in this era of Star Wars history. Without reading external expanded universe content, it's extremely difficult to figure out what the Resistance even is, what the First Order is and where it came from, and even with that expanded content, there's very little context, and both sides seem to be very lacking in any kind of ideology. And I think this problem stems from a sort of unfair, widespread opinion of the prequel movies, I suspect. It's generally bounced around a lot that people didn't like the politics in the Star Wars prequels. I personally love those elements of the story. I think they add a hell of a lot to the world of Star Wars, and I think, frankly, Revenge of the Sith may well be my favourite Star Wars film. It's a flawed movie, but I hate to break it to everyone, all of these Star Wars movies are flawed, and always have been. And I really appreciate the prequel trilogy's attempt to take a step back and tell a larger political drama about this galaxy, rather than just continuing to do what the original trilogy had already done well. But either way, it's understandable that something that has been interpreted as a dislike of the Star Wars audience is not something they would want to have extensively in the sequel trilogy. So if they want to take a step back on the politics, I understand that. But I suspect they may have taken a step back so massive that it's now quite difficult to tell what's happening. The original trilogy gave us just about enough context to know what was going on without getting swamped in tax negotiations and stuff. The Rebel Alliance was a large enough political power, and it was evident enough that they controlled planets and people's opinions and had fleets of ships that we could end the film in Return of the Jedi with the inference that they would then take over governance of the galaxy and everything would be fine. But we're now looking at a situation in this sequel trilogy where the Resistance is literally the main cast plus 9 numb in a freighter. Are these people going to rule the galaxy when the First Order falls? I'm getting increasingly worried that this sequel trilogy is going to end with the First Order falling and absolutely no explanation of who rules the galaxy or what's going on. And it seems like nobody has been particularly bothered by the people of the galaxy or their plight for this entire trilogy, despite it being allegedly the motivation of all the characters. The Resistance is supposedly a sort of proxy army of the New Republic, fighting the First Order because the New Republic isn't willing to, at least not publicly, on behalf of the people of the New Republic who they're worried will be oppressed by the First Order. Now, quite crucially, halfway through The Force Awakens, the New Republic collapses completely. Now, let's not get into details about how blowing up one solar system wouldn't cause a galaxy-spanning republic to fall apart, but let's assume that it just did somehow, since that's what the movies do. The reaction to this by Resistance officers is incredibly tepid and uninterested. To make a rather belabored comparison, this is kind of like a US soldier in the Vietnam War being told that the entire North American continent has just exploded and sunk, and saying, oh dear, that's really rather serious. Well, I guess I better get back to fighting the Viet Cong. I mean, these people need to get some perspective here. Let's take a step back. There's now nothing left. There's nothing these people are fighting for. It's all gone. And you know, being against the odds in such a massive way, fair enough, you can play that up for drama. Let's have these characters talk about how bleak it is, and how it really is just like 10 people against this giant totalitarian government that now runs everything. How on earth are we going to liberate the people of the galaxy when it's only us fighting back? But that's never drawn attention to at all. And when you have this few people fighting for the supposed good guy ideology against the people who run the galaxy, you start to wonder whether the people of the galaxy even care about the Resistance, if they really want the Resistance to liberate them. Surely there would be more people in the Resistance if the galaxy was this bothered about the situation. The small size of the Resistance seems to continuously undermine the writing in these films, as they seem to be carrying on writing them as though they are the Rebel Alliance. There are strange lines like Poe Dameron suggesting that it will make a meaningful difference if they destroy a First Order dreadnought because they are fleet killers, seemingly forgetting that the Resistance consists of 4 ships. The First Order could be 1 Star Destroyer and they would still be horribly outmatched. The odds are so comically one-sided that tactics don't even come into it anymore. As presented in these films, the Resistance is essentially a couple of fighter squadrons on Dakar and a couple of warships, and then the stuff that Vice Admiral Holdo brings over from wherever she was hanging out. And the First Order seemed to originally be written as though they were a small high-tech enclave, but then suddenly the opening crawl for The Last Jedi suggests they've conquered the entire galaxy off-screen screen. But either way, it gives you the feeling that the First Order and the Resistance are just these two gangs having an irrelevant fight out in the middle of nowhere. You don't get the feeling that any of this is contributing to the overall galactic picture, even when the opening crawl assures you that it is. Now, it seems to me the solution to this is painfully obvious. These films should have been about the New Republic. We watched the entire original trilogy following a rebellion whose purpose was to restore the Republic. It seems to rather retrospectively diminish that achievement by making them completely useless in these new films and almost programmed to fail as quickly as possible. I understand that they wanted to promote the original kind of paradigm of the original trilogy in that we now again have a resistance order, again against a large oppressive force. And I understand that. That's what Star Wars fans appreciated in the original trilogy. But trying to force that narrative through here, it flies in the face of all reason and common sense and leaves us with a sort of off-brand rebel alliance fighting a war against a power that is either something they could realistically beat or something so massively overpowered that the Resistance should be of absolutely no concern to them at all. The stakes are inconsistent and uninteresting even if they were consistent, and it leaves me wishing for the interesting motivations of the Galactic Republic and the Confederacy of Independent Systems. So we have a conflict wherein the Resistance isn't enormously bothered by what's going on with the people of the galaxy, and the people of the galaxy don't seem enormously bothered by what's going on between the First Order and the Resistance. So why do any of these characters have any motivations at all, and why should we be motivated to care? Now, this is something where if you don't really think about it very much, you can still enjoy these films. The personal stories of each of these characters are separate from the political viewpoint, and they're all presumably going to be resolved in fairly understandable and entertaining ways, so most of the audience can come out of these having a good time. But I think it's a shame that if you take a step back for 1 second, it's really hard to figure out what anybody is fighting for in these films. I think this is a complaint that a lot of people have, and I understand the origins of it. It's reactionary to people's opinions of the prequels, but I really hope this is kind of a learning experience for everybody involved with Star Wars here, that even if you completely diminish the political side of the story as much as you can to remove as much content perceived to be boring as possible, you have to leave some context behind. Otherwise, it's 3 hours of people fighting for nothing. People who are the good guys and the bad guys merely because the screenplay tells them so. And I think even a series of films that is meant to be universally consumable family entertainment can hold itself to a little bit of a higher standard for narrative context than that. Perhaps The Rise of Skywalker will zoom out the scale a little bit and inform us as to what's actually going on in this conflict before the end. But even still, I feel like that's something that should definitely have happened before we were 75% of the way through this story. I just hope that people who are disappointed by the lack of politics in these new films, or people who are realizing the effect that has on the small-scale storytelling, will perhaps reevaluate their opinions of the prequel films, as I think despite their faults, they presented a far more interesting series of historical events to add to the universe and to the world building than we've got in this sequel trilogy. But those are just my thoughts, and I'd love to hear what yours are, so let me know in the comments below. Thanks for listening. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off. Thank you for watching Spacedock. If you're interested in supporting the channel, please do check out the links on the screen right now or in the description below for our Patreon and channel membership services. Anything you can pledge goes towards improving our team and our equipment and allowing us to put together bigger and more exciting video projects for you guys on the channel.